Hey all, JTC here, and today we're going to go over the patch notes for Garbs and Penances. Now, I know I'm a little bit late to this, but I still have some opinions I wanted to share regarding the patch, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. We have added a new set of class penances with tiered cosmetic rewards to go along with them. The new penances provide more straightforward progression goals and are aimed at reinforcing the class roles, rewarding playing them well and without disrupting the game. The old class penances have been moved to a tab at the bottom of the penance menu under Redacted. We consider them to be more of trick challenges, often requiring the entire team's collaboration and a break from normal gameplay. This can be a lot of fun, but should not be mandatory or forced upon unsuspecting teammates. Okay, so far I definitely agree. I definitely think that most of the penances within the game should be more geared as kind of a tutorial for that class, essentially teaching how to play that class, what that class should be focusing on, and rewarding people for doing that role so that they understand how to play that class better. I don't mind having kind of trick challenge penances within the game, but I do have a problem if they directly harm the team, even if they're supposed to even if they're supposed to be completed with like a full 4-man group, they still shouldn't really be harming the team. Also, I don't know why they would name it Redacted rather than just naming them trick challenges if that's what they believe them to be. That's kind of a weird name and kind of, causes you to raise an eyebrow if you didn't read these patch notes. Some of the old penances have also undergone some number tweaking to make them more achievable as a solo player without interrupting your teammates. Good. Also, we have added a private session requirement for some Ogre and Psyker and Zealot penances to clarify that they require full team collaboration to be completed. Now, I know the overwhelming consensus from the community regarding this change has been negative because it locks solo players out from getting these penances in the first place, but I'm actually okay with this change as a temporary solution because I actually have a theory. My theory is that Fat Shark wants to go back and rework these penances that are actively detrimental to you and your team, like the Psyker Suicide one, whatever it's called, but they physically don't have the time right now because they're focused on more important things like fixing the game and adding new content. So this is their temporary solution. Now, obviously, I don't actually know if this is true. This is just my tinfoil hat theory, but I am okay with this as a temporary solution if Fat Shark is going to rework these penances in the future and then remove the private lobby restriction from them. So here are some of the new penances. Veteran Sharpshooter includes kill 350 enemies with ranged weak spot hits, replenish 5,000 total ammunition to allies using Scavenger. On Malice Threat or higher, kill 150 enemies that have been marked by volley fire, kill 100 enemies that are over 25 meters away, kill 2 elite or special enemies during a single volley fire 50 times, and on Heresy Threat or higher, keep volley fire active for 20 seconds 5 times. Now, I really, really like these specific Veteran Sharpshooter penances. Why? Because it specifically focuses on the ranged portion of Veteran Sharpshooter. Veteran is most effective at ranged, and the problem that Power Sword is introduced is a lot of veterans have kind of relied on Power Sword and therefore kind of relied on Veteran as a melee class in some kind of backwards way. This is retraining them and retraining people who pick up the game to use Veteran as a ranged class, which is his strongest feat, and I like that. Use penances to train newer players how to play the class. Good. Psyker includes kill 200 elite or specialist enemies with Brain Burst, use Psychedelic Wrath to survive perils of the warp 50 times. I just want to say I specifically like this one because a lot of people don't know that you can ult while you are actively overheating to save yourself, and by adding this, you introduce that mechanic to the general player base, and that's good. On Malice Threat or higher, kill 100 elite or specialist enemies with a Brain Burst while at maximum warp charges. That's fine. On Malice Threat or higher, kill 2,500 enemies with warp attacks. Good. On Heresy Threat or higher, kill 25 Poxhounds, mutants, or Scab Trappers using Brain Burst before they incapacitate you or an ally. On Heresy Threat or higher, complete 3 full missions without being hit in melee by an elite enemy. Now, see, I actually also like that one because it is kind of reminiscent of Veterans, one where you don't want to be hit in melee, but it's not as incredibly strict about it as Veterans is. I don't mind having to go out of my way to complete some sort of challenge as long as that challenge isn't miserable to complete. And, having to go through a mission without being hit in melee a single time is actually miserable because melee is a huge part of the game, but having to specifically avoid being hit in melee by one specific kind of enemy, not that bad. Zealot Preacher includes stun 1,500 enemies using stun grenades, replenish 750 toughness using Chastise the Wicked. On Malice Threat or higher, kill 75 stun enemies with critical hits, kill 1,000 enemies with melee attacks, while at least 3 stacks of Martyrdom. On Heresy Threat or higher, kill 75 elite or specialist enemies with powered melee attacks, chain or powered weapons. On Heresy Threat or higher, use Chastise the Wicked, dash toward a targeted enemy that is wielding a ranged weapon 40 times. Once more, on Have Faith, I'm actually happy that that's in the game, because a lot of people don't know that you can actually target Chastise the Wicked by holding down the ult button, so that introduces that mechanic, and that's good. And I don't mind also what I like to call grind penances, like Crowd Control or Stay Strong, because that simply rewards you for playing the game. And then Ogrin, last one for Ogrin is Revive or assist 40 knockdown or incapacitated allies, knock down 5,000 enemies. On Malice Threat or higher, knock down 3 ranged enemies using Bull Rush 25 times, kill 2 enemies with a single melee attack 250 times, complete 3 full missions without any allies being knocked down or incapacitated for longer than 10 seconds and without any allies dying. That's also a good penance. Why? Because it's a challenge, but it's not overly restrictive and actually miserable to play. There's a little tiny bit of room for error, and that's perfect. I've always said, I sound like a broken record on this channel if you've been watching me for any amount of time. I have always said that in the Tide games, it's basically impossible to play perfectly just because of the nature of the Tide games. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're like the top 0.001% of players. It's pretty much impossible to play perfectly 100% of the time, so you're going to make mistakes. So expecting perfection in penances is bad by design, so allowing for a little bit of wiggle room is good. And then hit 4 elite or specialist enemies with big boxes of hurt without missing an elite or specialist enemy with a big box of hurt 5 times. Also, that's pretty much fine. Updated penances change the required mission time that the player must be in coherency with an ally from 100% to 90%. That's fine. I still kind of hate that penance, and I'll never do it. Change the number of enemy requirements from 70 to 60. I'm actually okay with that. That should make it much easier to get. That's the one where you have to bull rush, where you have to ult through 60 enemies with one single ult. Change the number of Ogrins you must hit with bull rush from 6 to 4. That's awesome. I don't know why they increased it to 6. 4 is a perfect number. It's still pretty rare to see 4 Ogrins, you know, and kind of in the same area at the same time, but seeing 6 at once, it was pretty much impossible, so that's a good change. And then Don't Stop Me Now can only be completed in a private game. Now, I don't remember which one Don't Stop Me Now is. I've already looked through this specific part of the patch notes, and I will say, I know 'tis just a flesh wound, the preacher one. I don't know why that one is locked into a private lobby game mode, because that's just a complete the mission without like healing more than once or something like that, which is that can be completed with randos with no problem. Psyker, the Malice Monstrum, this is pretty much the #1 thing that I would have said needed to be locked instantaneously. This was the kill a monstrosity after hurting 90% of its health with your Brain Burst, which is absolutely awful to have in a public lobby, so I'm very happy that this one is actually in a private game. They also changed Going Out with a Bang, changed the number of elites you must kill from 3 to 1. Good and all, but I genuinely think this should just be deleted from the game or reworked entirely. Like I said, I hope they do it in the future. And honestly, I think this should have been the other one that should have been locked into a private game, because it actively hurts you and your team. So I would have liked to see this one in a private game, but okay. And then change the number of enemies you must kill from 5 to 4. I don't know what pick and mix is. 1 in the chamber, that's fine. Increase the number of times you need it. Yeah, that's fine. And then change the requirement from 100% accuracy to 90% accuracy for make every shot count. I believe this was the penance that people were constantly cheesing. So the fact that it's no longer 100% accuracy and allows for a little room for error means that people aren't going to cheese it as hard, which is good. Enemy units balance tweaks. Change spawn distribution for Heresy and Damnation, weight default population towards more scab maulers while introducing more variations of elite patrols. Please note that the total amount of elites and total threat value of all enemies spawn remains the same. So they're not, it sounds like they're not actually spawning more enemies, they're just introducing more maulers and more elite patrols into the mix, which is fine. Made heavier stagger variations require more impact for scab maulers while tuning their walk switch distance and increasing their range stagger resistance. They should still stagger, but prefer the lighter stagger reactions. This makes them less prone to fall over with the rest of the horde and instead stand and take the pain. Let's read the dev note. The pacing director maintains the balance of all things. This change aims to provide more variation in the encounters by weighing away from ranged mobs, thank God, and giving the melee guys more presence. By spawning more melee elites, the director will spawn fewer ranged ones. By keeping maulers on their feet, they'll separate from the horde and will stand out in the crowd. This is overall a positive change. I genuinely think in the higher difficulties there were way too many ranged mobs. I don't mind the occasional room full of ranged mobs and the occasional pure ranged firefight, but when literally every single room back to back to back to back to back is just constant ranged units and there's no melee units, it starts to get very draining very fast. So I really hope this is going to help kind of balance that out, and I don't mind a buff to maulers. Because honestly, maulers weren't that much of a threat. Really, no elites are really that much of a threat except berserkers and crushers in some cases, so I'm fine with a buff to maulers. Increased hit zone damage and adjusted hit points on Plague Ogre and Beast of Nurgle to reward weak spots and torso hits more. Okay, so Beast of Nurgle just across the board will take more damage, and Plague Ogre as well, but Plague Ogre has received a buff of 3,000 HP. And then Rebalanced Monstrosity hit point pulls over difficulties. There is a reduction in overall hit points in Sedation and Uprising, and an overall increase in Damnation. Now, I'm actually okay with these changes. Beast of Nurgle sometimes was a little too tanky, so I'm fine that he's a little easier to kill. And Plague Ogre died way too fast, so an extra boost in health is always nice. And then, so the Tide games have a not a really weird thing, but there's a different kind of balance between the lower difficulties and the higher difficulties, and it's absolutely possible that bosses or something dies way too slowly in the lower difficulties and dies way too quickly in the higher difficulties. So it's very normal for the devs to balance different things, or to balance the difficulties differently like this. So I think this is an overall positive increase, because the problem is if monstrosities are too tanky, they are at absolute best complete slogs and really slow the game down and make the game irritating, and at absolute worst, a guaranteed team wipe whenever they spawn. If you want an example, at the beginning of Vermintide 2's launch, Bile Trolls were genuinely impossible to kill. Fixed case where Demon Host could stay longer than intended after players got revived during the fight. That's cool, that was a bug that I noticed that happens sometimes. Weapons and Blessings. Increased active duration of Rev It Up Blessings available on the Assault Chainsword, Chain Axe, and Heavy Eviscerator from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Okay. That's cool and all. I'm all for a buff to Rev It Up, but honestly, the chain weapons in this game are so painfully mediocre that they need way more than a buff to Rev It Up. Heavy Eviscerator has done a little better overall than the Assault Chainsword and the Assault Chain Axe, and the Assault Chainsword is a little better than the Chain Axe, and the Chain Axe is just absolutely terrible, but they really need just buffs across the board and not just blessing tweaks. Increase the number of tiers on the Blessing Power Cycler from 1 to 2, adding a tier below the previous. That's good. That makes it less difficult to get. As it stands, Power Cycler is essentially mandatory on the whatever the weapon is called, the Power Sword. So I'm okay with making it a little easier to get. I'm in the camp that the Power Sword and therefore Power Cycler should just be reworked from the ground up, because the current iteration of it and the current design is just problematic, but I think this is a good temporary solution to the problem. Added 2 more tiers to Bloodletter, that's good. Feat balance. We're making a pass at feats with lower picked rates, buffing as we go to get the internal balance on a couple of tiers a bit more even. So for the feats, rather than actually reading the changes to the feats, I have the feats pulled up with the changes already made to them, so I'm just going to directly read the feats with the changes already made. Exhilarating Takedown. Replenish 20% toughness when killing an enemy with a ranged weak spot hit, in addition to reducing toughness damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. That is actually a good change. As far as I'm aware, Confirmed Kill is the best, or the kind of the meta on Zealot, which is replenish 25% toughness on elite kill and a further 25% toughness over time. And exhilarating, the new Exhilarating Takedown might actually allow it to compete with Confirmed Kill, which I'm okay with. Dead Shot. While using your ranged weapon's alternate fire, you have a 25% chance increased critical hit chance and 60% reduced sway, but lose 8% stamina every second and an additional 4% for each shot. I'm not gonna lie, I don't see the point in ever running Deadshot. There might be some big brain 5-head build that I'm not aware of that uses Deadshot that might be really good. But as far as I'm aware, at this exact moment, Deadshot is like one of the worst talents in the game, and I don't know why you would ever run it. And even with this buff, I still don't know why you would ever run it. So yeah, the bigger they are, 75% damage, increased damage for Ogryns and Monstrosities during Volley Fire, and then Volley Fire designates Ogryn and Monstrosities as priority targets, and killing a designated enemy during Volley Fire refreshes its duration. This is also a really good change. It might actually allow it to compete with Counterfire, which is the current meta, which designates all shooters as the priority targets, so also a good change. Skullbreaker, smash 'em good. Replenish 25% toughness on single enemy melee hit, and best form of defense, which replenishes 25% toughness on hitting multiple enemies with a single heavy melee attack. I think these are good changes, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't really think 5% is going to make or break it. So yeah, I mean, it's a buff, so I'll take it, but I don't really see this, having that much of an impact on Ogryn. Blood and Thunder, heavy melee attacks apply 6 stacks of bleed to hit enemies. Once more, this is a pretty minor buff, so I don't really expect it to break the bank or like make Ogryn suddenly insanely good or insanely overpowered, but it's a buff, so I'll take it. And then Bloodthirst, plus 10% damage resistance per bleeding enemy in melee range, stacks 6 times. So this is a buff from 40% up to 60% damage reduction, and that is actually pretty massive, so I'm really happy to see this. Bloodthirst, just looking at the level 20 feat row, this actually might make Bloodthirst the best in slot, which I'm actually okay with, because 60% increase, or 60% damage resistance is actually going to be pretty insane. For Preacher, Martyrdom. Martyrdom is the 8% damage increase for 15 missing health, max stacks 3. I'm sorry, but no matter how high you buff Martyrdom, it's still not going to be a good passive, because in Darktide, it's not a good idea to be at low health, because there's really no way to pad your health like there is in Vermintide. So the lower your health is, the much higher you are at risk for going down. So I don't really see Martyrdom still being good. So yeah. Purify in Blood, replenish 100% more toughness on melee kills. This actually might make Purify in Blood the best in slot now. We'll have to see. Also, for those that don't know, the old Purify in Blood, which was the 75% bonus, put Zealot on par with Veteran's base toughness regen on melee kills, which is also 75. His base is higher than the other classes, which is 50, I believe. But with Purify in Blood, Zealot now holds the highest melee kill toughness regen, which is cool. Fury of the Faithful, plus 20% attack speed for 10 seconds on using Chastise the Wicked. This is actually a very good buff, and it actually kind of makes it worthwhile using, although it depends on the weapon, because with some weapons like the Thunder Hammers, you actually cannot really feel the attack speed, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So overall, it's still not going to be a fantastic perk, but it definitely now actually, there's now a reason to run it. And then for Psyker, Warp Absorption, replenish 15% toughness when you kill an enemy with a warp attack. Once more, 5% increase isn't really gonna make or break anything, I don't think, so it's not really that big of a change, and I still think if you're running any kind of, like, staff or warp-based weapon, Quietude is still gonna be your best bet. And then the rest is just a bunch of bug fixes, so that pretty much does it for these patch notes. So overall, I think these patch notes are fine, although I do have to say, I do hope that eventually, or pretty soon, we're going to be getting some bigger news about some, bigger things coming. I know there's a new map coming, but we're getting to the point where we're starting to need more content, so I'm really hoping that soon we're going to see some, brand new content. But yeah, let me know what y'all think in the comments below, and thanks for watching. See y'all next time.